If anyone ever lived their truth to the very end, if anyone ever dared to turn their body into a flame in the dark night of prejudice, it was Sylvester James. He once stood on America's grandest stage, wearing a fiery red dress and singing in a falsetto voice that reached the deepest corners of the listener's heart. Sylvester James never hid his gender identity, never feared judgment, and never shied away from naming the struggles of the LGBTQ+ community. But there was one thing he kept secret his entire life: a name, a man who never appeared in public, never stepped on stage, and was never mentioned in any interview. Only in his final moments, lying in a cold hospital room, did he whisper that name, and in the will he left behind. There was a single audio tape with a handwritten note on the outside for the one I was never allowed to love publicly. Who was that man? And why did Sylvester choose to keep silent until his last breath? Watch until the end of the video. You won't believe this secret had been hidden for more than 3 decades. And to understand why he chose to carry that secret to the grave, let us return to where it all began, where dreams were once stifled a childhood in the Watts neighborhood. Sylvester was born on September 6, 1947, in a small house at the end of 103rd Street in the working-class neighborhood of Watts, Los Angeles. It was a place where the sound of gunshots was sometimes more familiar than church bells. His father died when he was very young. His mother left to pursue another marriage, so Sylvester was raised by his grandmother, the only person in the family who never questioned why a little boy liked to sing Billie Holiday songs or wear a faux fur scarf in front of the mirror. From an early age, Sylvester showed he was different. He had a clear, high voice and was so obsessed with gospel music that he would stand on the porch every morning humming hymns. When he joined the children's choir at the local Baptist church, he thought he had finally found where he belonged, but not long after. The church board decided to remove him from the choir because he sang too femininely and had improper expressions when referring to God. A woman on the church's music board even told him to his face that your voice was arranged by the devil. It didn't stop there. School became more about survival than learning. One day, after Sylvester sang a short melody during recess, a group of boys grabbed his hair, tore off his shirt, threw his books into a ditch, and called him names no child should ever hear. After that day, he stopped singing, at least not where others could hear. In a bedroom with a window facing a rotting fence, Sylvester began writing his first songs. They weren't meant for the stage. They were confessions, prayers to himself. There was one song he wrote for the only boy who had dared to hold his hand under the table during math class, but just a few days later, when classmates began to whisper, he burned that paper in the bathroom. In an old journal that his grandmother kept all her life, they found pages where he repeatedly wrote the name of a man in incomplete form, just 2 italicized letters, A and D underlined in red ink. No one at the time could have imagined that more than 30 years later, at the final moment of his life, Sylvester would whisper that same name and take it with him forever, without anyone ever learning who it belonged to. If there was one place in America where those who were different could truly be themselves, then in the early 1970s, it was San Francisco. And that was exactly where Sylvester James arrived at the age of 22, after leaving the impoverished Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles. He didn't bring much, just a few outfits, some loose change, and one simple dream: to live as his true self without being cast out. But perhaps he didn't realize that to gain that freedom, he would have to give up a piece of his life. In San Francisco, Sylvester quickly joined a performance group called the Coquettes. It was a famous drag troupe in the underground scene, known for their wild, colorful performances that defied all gender norms. Members wore wedding dresses, dressed as Egyptian queens, or sang opera with gender-blending voices. Everything was allowed, as long as you dared to express yourself. And Sylvester didn't just dare, he stood out. His voice could silence a room, not from shock, but from pure emotion. They said once you heard him sing, you would never forget it. Yet, even in a world that seemed full of freedom, Sylvester kept a quiet space to himself, while other group members partied after performances. He often slipped away without saying where he was going. When asked, he would simply smile and say softly, "Someone's waiting for me." That was enough to stop the questions. But from there, A cloud of mystery began to form around him. On some nights, he could be seen standing for a long time backstage, holding a necklace, his face lost in faraway thought. In 1971, Sylvester appeared in a short film called Trisha's Wedding, a satirical take on the imagined wedding of President Nixon's daughter. His performance shocked many, as he played two opposing characters, a white woman in a wedding gown and a black man protesting the wedding, in one scene. He had to kiss himself in the mirror. It wasn't just a bold image, it was a deeply emotional moment. A fellow crew member recalled that after filming that scene. Sylvester sat alone for a long time, saying nothing, staring into space. Few people know that during that shoot. The camera accidentally captured him checking the necklace around his neck. It was a round pendant, etched with the image of two men holding hands, with two engraved initials underneath S and A. When he noticed the camera lens pointing his way, he turned and quietly said, "No need to film this." After the film, the Cockettes had a major performance scheduled in New York. Everyone hoped to be recognized on a professional stage, but the night ended in disappointment. The audience rejected them, booed, heckled, even threw food at the stage. The group fell apart. Sylvester, right after the performance, left without saying goodbye. From that point on, he walked alone. Going solo wasn't easy. He started over in small gay bars, places with no media, no attention, but real understanding. He still wore dresses, still sang emotional songs, still used that falsetto voice that left people breathless. But from then on, the necklace with the two men was always tucked beneath his shirt, never shown in public again. Some said he came to San Francisco to find freedom, but the more he lived openly, the more he understood that not everything could be said aloud. Some things had to be kept, because if spoken, they might vanish. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was the only love he ever had, or maybe it was himself. The question remained, who was the one with the letter? Oh, why did he keep that person hidden forever? And was it possible that behind all the brilliance was a love never acknowledged? The answer, perhaps, only Sylvester knew. But that silence, throughout the rest of his life, remained an unhealed wound in the story of a man who dared to live openly but was never allowed to love openly. And that silence became the most heartbreaking part of the legend of Sylvester James. When You Make Me Feel Mighty Real was officially released in the summer of 1978, all of America was swept up in a wave of energy like never before. It wasn't just a catchy disco hit. It was a bold declaration from someone who chose to live authentically during a time when being openly gay could mean getting beaten, fired, or shunned. That person was Sylvester James, a black man with a soaring voice who wore dresses, earrings, dramatic makeup, and never bowed his head on stage. The song shot up the Billboard charts, became an international disco anthem, and earned Sylvester the title of America's first disco queen. This success came after signing with Fantasy Records in early 1978. They knew he was different, and they wanted that difference to capture the market. But Sylvester had conditions from the very first meeting. He stated clearly if he signed, he would tour with one person, someone who would not appear on stage, not be seen publicly, but must always be backstage. At first, the label assumed it was a personal manager or tech assistant, but when that person never carried any equipment or answered any questions, suspicions grew. Not long after, the label's communications director quietly asked, "Who is that person?" Sylvester simply smiled and said something no one expected. "If he's not behind the curtain, I can't sing." Everything seemed fine until Sylvester began recording his next album in a late 1978 meeting. The label asked him to revise the lyrics of a new song to avoid gender confusion. They wanted him to change he to you, to tone down lines that directly referenced love between two men. In exchange, they promised him a primetime TV appearance, but Sylvester refused. He didn't argue, he just quietly declined. After multiple failed negotiations, in March 1979, Sylvester officially sued Fantasy Records, accusing them of disrespecting his creative rights and pressuring his private life. A black, openly gay artist suing a major label while disco was still dismissed as trash music shocked the entire music industry. But it didn't end there. During a European tour in the fall of 1979, Sylvester had a major concert in London at the Hammersmith Odeon. The show sold out in 3 days and was covered as a major cultural event. Yet just before showtime, a crisis occurred. The man who always accompanied Sylvester, known only as that person, was denied backstage access for lacking a security pass. Sylvester was in his dressing room applying makeup when he heard. He threw down his brush, stormed into the hallway, pushed past the crew, and shouted in front of dozens of technicians, "If he's not let in, I'm not going on stage." Everything froze. The stage manager called the label in a panic. Assistants scrambled, unsure what to do. In the end, they relented. The man was allowed in through a side entrance. Without ID, without name. He didn't sit in the director's chair, didn't step into the spotlight. He just stood silently behind the black curtain. Stage right, only a few feet from Sylvester. That night, Sylvester gave everything. He opened with "You Make Me Feel," then sang more than 10 songs without pause. No one knew how he did it. No one knew someone behind that curtain was quietly crying, and no one was allowed to take a photo of him. A crew member later said, "I used to think Sylvester was a crazy artist, but that night, I understood he was someone who would risk his entire career just to keep someone close." That story never made it to the press. No photos, no footage, no backstage drama leaked. But a year later, when Sylvester released his next album, there was a small line in the thank you section of the insert for the one always behind the curtain. Sylvester's rise began on small stages, but his light was never ordinary. It came from a heart once wounded, once cast out from church, once burned a song in fear of being outed, and when that light reached its brightest, he used it to protect what he had never dared to reveal. And if anyone asks what he gave up for that glory, perhaps the answer is a name never spoken aloud, but always there, behind every curtain. But the truth is, Sylvester James had more than one love. If anyone ever held Sylvester's hand in broad daylight, it was Michael Lyons. On an early fall day in 1970, under a large tree in Golden Gate Park, surrounded by close friends and joyful laughter, Sylvester and Lyons stood together, hand in hand, exchanging simple but sincere vows. There was no priest, no legal recognition, but for Sylvester, it was a real wedding, a moment he lived with his whole heart. He once recalled it with glowing eyes. "We declared ourselves to each other. We didn't need papers, we just needed to stand there and look into each other's eyes." But the romance didn't last. Less than 2 years later, Lyons left. Some said he couldn't handle the pressure of being with someone like Sylvester, always bold, always watched, always scrutinized. Others said Lyons grew uncertain about his own identity. From 1973 onward, Sylvester had other relationships. He dated John May, a dancer who performed with him in small Castro shows. That lasted under a year. Then came Tom Daniels, a Canadian photographer who traveled with Sylvester on a short New York tour. But like John, Tom left quickly, leaving behind a few photos and scattered diary entries. Those lovers were occasionally mentioned by Sylvester, sometimes in jokes, sometimes in regret. But there was one man never named, never photographed, never confirmed, just vague appearances backstage, brief glimpses behind the curtain, a presence that was quietly, strangely constant. He was known among insiders as the man behind the curtain. No one knew when it began, but at every important show, he was there, never in the front row, never speaking to press, just always backstage, behind Sylvester, in the shadows. Only those closest noticed that when he was around. Sylvester's voice felt warmer, softer, filled with a longing too deep to name. There's a story told by a former costume assistant, one night in Paris, 1980, after a major show at the Olympia Theater. Sylvester asked everyone to clear the dressing room early. The assistant had forgotten a bag and returned only to see something unforgettable: Sylvester removing his false lashes, and that unknown man standing behind him, leaning in to kiss his shoulder gently. From then, rumors spread. Some said it was an old lover returned. Others guessed it was a secret, illegal affair. But one whisper grew louder backstage: the man was married, that he was straight, had a wife, children, and a life far outside Sylvester's world. That those backstage moments were stolen escapes, brief visits before returning to a home where Sylvester's name was never spoken. And that was the only time he admitted the other man was not free. From then on, everything seemed to make more sense. The fleeting meetings, the nights after shows when Sylvester would skip the parties and go straight back to his hotel room alone, the backstage photos that always carefully avoided one corner, and how that man never appeared in pictures, never left a trace. But the most striking detail was this: Sylvester never once denied it. Whenever asked about his love life, he would simply smile and say, "Some things, if spoken aloud, no longer belong to you." A simple response, but one that silenced many in the industry, because they understood it wasn't shame, nor avoidance. It was absolute protection for something he believed would disappear if exposed. In 1984, during a recording session in Los Angeles, a band member found a pendant under the sofa. It was a round charm etched with two men holding hands, and a small inscription on the back, S&A 1976. The musician handed it back to Sylvester. He didn't hide it, didn't explain, just slipped it into his pocket and continued recording as if nothing had happened. That moment only deepened the belief that A was the mysterious man who had been with Sylvester from the mid-70s until the end. And if that were true, then the secret wasn't Michael Lyons, not John, not Tom, but someone never named, yet present at every show, every journey, every defining moment. As his fame grew, every move he made was scrutinized as a symbol of freedom. He became the first target when society needed someone to blame, mock, or judge through prejudice. In 1980, Sylvester was arrested in an antique store in New York for allegedly stealing a rare coin. Police searched his purse and found a vintage coin valued over $500. No one listened when he said it had been a gift from a friend years ago, with no receipt or certificate. Headlines blared, "Disco Queen arrested for theft." He spent 3 nights in city jail, although he was cleared days later when the shop owner discovered an inventory mistake. The damage was done. Some radio stations temporarily pulled his music. A scheduled TV appearance was canceled last minute. It wasn't the first time. A few years earlier, he was taken to the station just for wearing a dress in public without a performance license. Back then, in many states, dressing outside one's gender could be charged as public disorder. Thanks to his fame, he was released within hours, no press coverage. But Sylvester knew luck wouldn't always be on his side. So he began withdrawing from parties, avoided press, limited interviews. He appeared less and less at public events. Some said Sylvester was tired of the stage. Others whispered he had lost his creative spark. But the truth was, he was facing a much deeper fear. From early 1987, Sylvester felt his body changing. He tired easily, coughed persistently, lost weight rapidly. When friends urged him to see a doctor, he shook his head, not out of denial, but because deep down, he already knew, and he didn't want it spoken aloud. In February 1987, Rick Cranmer, Sylvester's partner of 3 years, began showing similar symptoms. Rick was quiet, reserved, and had stood by Sylvester during the hardest times when his fame faded and the media stopped calling. Sylvester once said Rick didn't have to stay, but chose to, and that made Sylvester love him more than anyone else. By June, Rick was admitted to San Francisco General Hospital, the diagnosis end-stage AIDS, at that time. The disease was still a death sentence, just waiting, day by day. Sylvester sat by his bed nearly every hour, but 3 weeks later, on a July morning in 1987, Rick passed away. Sylvester stood there, staring at the wall, as if half his soul had left with him. After Rick's funeral, Sylvester pulled further from the stage. He canceled many shows, declined interviews. When asked why, he said only, "I need quiet to hear myself one last time." Around this time, a close friend recalled Sylvester collapsing after leaving the studio. It was September 1987. He was recording the final tracks for an album planned for release the next year. He couldn't stand, was rushed to the ER, but after recovering, he still refused HIV testing. His answer left people speechless. "I don't need a doctor to tell me what my body already knows." From late 1987, he began journaling more, in a black notebook. The last page was scrawled with a bold line, "I still haven't done one thing to acknowledge him before it's too late." It was written around December 1987, no date. the handwriting shakier than usual, as if his hands were trembling. No one asked who him was, but they knew it wasn't Rick. Rick had been public, photographed, known to friends. Him was someone else, someone never allowed to appear beside him in the light, the one he kept for himself. Maybe that's why the silence hurt the most when he knew time was slipping away. By early 1988, Sylvester's health had clearly declined. He lost nearly 20 pounds in 3 months, couldn't sing a full song. But he still insisted on performing one last time at the Gay Freedom Day Parade in June 1988, seated in a wheelchair, wearing a purple kimono, waving to the crowd through the music. That was the last time fans saw him smile. From September on, he rarely left the house, began liquidating belongings, sending gifts to friends, and organizing his unreleased recordings. Among them was a raw acoustic track, just his voice and soft piano. On the tape cover, he wrote in red ink, "If you're still alive, you'll know this is for you." No one knows if the tape was ever delivered, but a few months later. On December 16, 1988, Sylvester took his last breath in a San Francisco hospital. No blood relatives were present, just a few close friends, a nurse, and a man in a black coat who entered moments before he passed. He said nothing, just held his hand. The nurse later said that in his final breaths, Sylvester whispered a name. No one heard it clearly, no one dared ask that man, but in Sylvester's personal box, among journals, sheet music, and papers, was a short letter unsigned, unsealed. It held a single line, "You are the last thing I kept secret, and the thing I regret the most." Perhaps that was what Sylvester never got to do, publicly love the man he loved most, before it was too late. Sylvester's funeral took place in late December 1988, unlike any other. It was a small concert among friends, loyal fans, and those touched by his music and brave truth. He lay in a velvet-lined coffin, dressed in a bright red kimono, draped in purple flowers from head to toe, as if preparing to take the stage one last time. In his will, along with assets for friends and charities supporting gay men with HIV, was a short addendum, "Keep the secret, as you always have. I love you." The recipient's initials AD. To this day, AD's identity remains unknown. No one came forward, no photos confirmed it. But one detail makes many believe the love was real. Every year, on December 16th, a bouquet of purple lavender is placed on Sylvester's grave at Englewood Park Cemetery. No sender. Some say it's an old lover. Some think it's a former performer, but some believe it's the one man Sylvester loved so deeply. He kept him hidden for life. Do you believe in a love so great that it never needed a shared photo, a public word, or a place in the spotlight, just a glance from behind the curtain? Sylvester once held a wedding with Michael Lyons in Golden Gate Park. He once introduced Rick Cranmer to the press, but the one name he whispered on his deathbed belonged to someone never seen with him publicly, mentioned only once in his will. Have you ever loved someone like that? If so, share your story in the comments. And if Sylvester James's quiet journey moved you, follow our channel for more untold stories of Black artists who gave everything just to protect the secret their heart could never forget.